I comment, she's staying there.
Okay.
Como un gatito, le falta comer.
Welcome to i24 News. You're watching Middle East Now. I'm your host, Bianca Zanini. Let's get into it. Let's start with introducing our studio guests tonight. We have former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Danny Ayalon, and our very own i24 News correspondent, Balir Sladin. And let's get into it. Now, Hamas is denying reports that have been swirling in the past hours that the group would return the bodies of 2 hostages later today in exchange for Israel releasing the 602 Palestinian prisoners scheduled to be freed last Saturday. Now, Israel is reportedly saying that if Hamas chooses to return the 4 bodies it is supposed to this week, as part of the first phase of the current ceasefire and hostages deal, without any ceremony, Israel will free the prisoners as agreed. Now, the decision to delay the release of the prisoners came after Israel criticized Hamas for cynically exploiting the release of the hostages with heavily choreographed and humiliating mass ceremonies every single week. Now, Hamas accused Israel of violating the terms of the deal. Meanwhile, 2 Palestinians were reportedly wounded in an Israeli drone strike in Gaza near a school in the southern city of Rafah a short while ago. The IDF has not yet commented, but says it identified a rocket being launched from southern Gaza, which fell short inside the strip, and they're now striking that launch site. The incident is being investigated. Now, the U.S. is pushing for the first time to extend the first phase of the deal amid reports that Israel is looking to resume the fighting in Gaza. More details in this next report.
The United States is declaring for the first time that it's looking to extend the first phase of the ceasefire in Gaza. Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, is heading to Israel on Wednesday for talks.
We have to get an extension of phase 1, and so I'll be going into the region this week, probably Wednesday, to negotiate that. And we're hopeful that we have the proper time to finish off, to begin phase 2 and finish it off and get more hostages released and move the discussion forward.
The first phase of the ceasefire and hostage release deal is supposed to end on March 1st. Under the current framework, phase 1 can be extended as long as the sides are engaged in negotiations over the second phase. Phase 2 envisions Hamas releasing all remaining hostages in exchange for thousands of Palestinian prisoners, a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, and a permanent end to the war. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reportedly stalled those talks, which were supposed to begin 3 weeks ago. Senior Israeli officials told i24 News that a return to military action in Gaza is highly likely. The IDF raised its alert and readiness level along the Gaza border on Sunday.
We are prepared to resume intense fighting at any moment. Our operational plans are ready. Let me state our core policies. In Gaza, we have eliminated most of Hamas's organized forces. But let there be no doubt, we will fully achieve our war objectives.
Witkoff acknowledged that the terms of Phase 2 present a major dilemma. Israel wants its hostages freed, but does not want Hamas to remain in power. Israel has also halted the release of 602 Palestinian prisoners on Saturday, citing Hamas's humiliation of hostages. In response, the terror group is refusing to engage in further negotiations until those prisoners are freed.
Now, earlier today, one of the freed hostages, Liri Albag, visited Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, which she apparently saw on TV while in Hamas captivity. We move now to our reporter in the field, Emmanuel Honoa, joining us live from Hostages Square. Emmanuel, we're starting to see and hear from more and more freed hostages about the importance of the rallies and the protests to get them home. Some saying they're joining the fight to free the rest. What can you tell us?
Right, Bianca. First, I want to start with a little memorial here that has been placed since the arrival of the bodies of Shiri Bibas and her two sons, Ariel Kfir Bibas, also Oded Lifshitz. You can see here there are candles that people can light in order to pay their respects. The sunflower, the color yellow that has become a symbol of the plight of the hostages, the mission of releasing the hostages that were and are still being held in Gaza, and of course the color orange that has come to symbolize, with the orange flowers to symbolize the very recognizable, the very symbolic red hair of the two young children, Ariel and Kfir Bibas. Truly a country in mourning. When you see this memorial, we know that the funeral will take place on Wednesday. It's going to be a very private funeral so that the families and the close relatives are able to mourn and pay their respects in the most intimate way possible. But there will be a procession throughout part of the country so that the country may be able to also pay its respects as the cortege of the caskets will be on their way to be buried, Bianca. So as you can see here, there really is a huge sadness here at the square, an element of mourning that the country has yet to have dealt with and is still trying to grasp the plight of these four hostages, Bianca.
All right, Emmanuel Honora, live with us from Hostages Square. Thank you very much for that update. Certainly, the story is very much not over. Danny, the U.S. is pushing now for an extension of the first phase of the deal. Why, and what does it indicate?
Well, first of all, I think this is Trump's objective. He said it from day one, even before he got into the Oval Office and the White House, that it's a high priority of his to release the hostages, and especially the American, Bianca. There's still an American citizen among the hostages. So for him, it's something which is important, not only on a humanitarian issue, but also on a political issue. Right. Now, there is a new team, of course, in Washington, and I think the Hamas will have to recalculate, because I believe they overplayed their hand with this ridiculous, really outrageous kind of ceremonies, with the way that they continue to threaten. And I believe here they will find out that this is a different team. And as somebody said, a new sheriff in town with Trump. And here, although, you know, at stake is, of course, the lives of the hostages, but Hamas risks a total annihilation of...
But let me ask you, what does that mean, a new sheriff in town? What could Trump support look like, apart from being hands-off and letting Israel do whatever it wants?
Well, that's the main threat, I think, or the main, the big club that we have over Hamas, because during the Biden's time, which was a great supporter of Israel, there's no doubt about it, but there were limitations. And in terms of munitions that we could not use, in terms of supplying humanitarian aid, which basically strengthened Hamas. And we see it now. We see that Hamas is still in control in Gaza, not just from a civil point of view, but also militarily. And this is after all the pounding that the IDF dealt it. So if there is a resumption, if, let's say, if there will not come to terms about extension of the first phase and releasing as many hostages as possible, then what they face is a much, much harder and stronger response than even before, when they got to this place it is. So
Right,
this
because now
supposedly
they wouldn't have the same amount of hostages to...
Right, and when I say the new sheriff, it's also a new policy, but also a new operational, I would say, tactics. That is, he is raising the ante, he is pushing more, he is threatening, and I believe he will make good on his threats.
All right, Valer, I want to ask you, we know that several Arab countries are working on a joint proposal for the future of Gaza. I mean, here in Israel, we are very naturally focused on the plight of the hostages, but there are so many other things around to consider. And this new proposal, it has not been officialized yet, but there are reports that it will not include a full demilitarization of Gaza. Is that a deal breaker for Israel, and should it be, if it isn't?
Yes, it is a red line for Israel. We've heard the Prime Minister saying that over and over again. We heard that also from other cabinet members. That's a red line for Israel. Now, there is a question here. What exactly they're suggesting? Because Hamas, on one hand, Osama Hamdan, for example, a week ago in Doha, said that this is out of question. We don't discuss this. We're not going to give any concession in terms of giving up on our weapons and complete disarmament. But today, Musa Abu Marzouk, for example, in the interview that he had with the New York Times, he said that we are open to discuss any issue, including the issue of the weapons that Hamas holds. Now, there are several scenarios here to what exactly could be done. One scenario is to put the weapons in facilities that are supervised by other countries, the European Union or any other body, or agreeing to some sort of not rebuilding the networks, the tunnel network that Hamas had, and also not to rebuild their weapons arsenal, their rocket arsenal, or stopping the recruitment of fighters. Experts say that disarmament, according to the New York Times, is unlikely, and it is unlikely. Otherwise, Israel has to do that by force, just getting in and reach a point where Hamas will say, I had enough, I will just agree to your terms. That's the only option.
Right. I mean, it seems that we're at an impasse, and every time we're in studio, it seems that analysts are saying, well, you know, one step at a time, and let's see if we can get closer, and there are these challenges, but they are possible to... It seems we're at a point right now where it does not seem realistic that a second phase can happen, or can finish, at least, can come to fruition, with Hamas saying we will not demilitarize, and Israel saying you have to.
Yes, this is exactly why Israel is seeking to extend the first phase of the deal, because it wants to get as many alive hostages as possible. By the way, even this phase of the deal was not including 33 hostages, was talking about 15 hostages, more or less. Netanyahu insisted that more hostages would be included in this quote-unquote humanitarian phase of the deal. And Hamas are saying that we are not, some of them at least, senior Hamas officials, they are saying that we're not ready to discuss the extension of phase one if you don't release our prisoners, because they are included in the first phase of the deal. Musa Abu Marzouk once again said that if we go to this extension of the first phase of the deal, that we will demand 500 to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for each Israeli hostage to be released, something that I really doubt that Israel would actually accept.
All right, so there seems to be a lot of red lines. And absolutely, when it comes to Israel pulling out entirely from Gaza, when it comes to Hamas completely demilitarizing, because even if we say that we get Hamas out of power, there's still a chance that there could be sort of a Hezbollahization of Gaza, where they would continue sort of behind the scenes. What is Israel's sort of carrot to allow this ceasefire deal to move on to the next phase?
I would say the extent that Israel can be flexible vis-a-vis Hamas is the, let's say, the expulsion of the Hamas leaders. That means sparing their lives, but they will have to be out of Gaza. If there's anything that Israelis understood during all these humiliating ceremonies, is that there is no daylight almost between Hamas and the rest of the population. So the Israelis now are harboring a lot of anger, and this is why the Israeli position is getting tougher. And I believe more Israelis now will support a tougher position. If before there was a split here, and there is still a split, but still there is now a critical mass of Israelis who would support going in and do away with Hamas, whatever it takes, even with collateral damage of the population at large.
All right, and exactly to your point here, Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel has completely changed the reality for Israelis and Palestinians, and the willingness to find a long-term solution is tainted with anger, with lack of trust, and with fear. It wasn't always that bad, though. Now, for the first time, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert is revealing the detailed map of the offer he made to Palestinian Authority Mahmoud Abbas in 2008, almost 20 years ago. Olmert proposed a permanent peace plan, a two-state solution that would have given the Palestinians 95.1% of the West Bank and Gaza, included a tunnel route to link the two, and even a division plan for Jerusalem. It was refused by the Palestinians, who say that they didn't take Olmert seriously because he was embroiled in a corruption scandal. And I am joined now by Samer Sinjilawi, a Fatah activist and chairman of the Jerusalem Development Fund. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, a lot of these details were known, but this is the first time that we see the actual map itself. 95.1% is not 100%. Why was this deal not taken, really?
Well, first of all, I have the privilege to know Mr. Olmert in person. He's an honest, courage, very wise Israeli leader. And I think, unfortunately, we, the Palestinians, we have missed a historical opportunity to close that deal that he offered to President Abbas. If you ask me why, I think it was lack of courage and wisdom from the other partner, from President Abbas. And by the way, he did not offer 94% of the West Bank. We were not losing 6%. It was 6% of swap. So he took some areas in the West Bank that has a concentration of settlers and annexed it to Israel. And in addition, or in opposite to this, he offered similar areas that would have been part of the Palestinian state. Some areas that are very important for us to create some kind of geographical continuity between the West Bank and Gaza. There was a corridor that was connecting Gaza to the West Bank as part of this swap, land swap. I think it was the best the Palestinians could have received. And I agree with Mr. Olmert that in 50 years and maybe more, we might not have a similar offer from the Israeli side. It's a pity if President Abbas would have signed this, agreed to sign it in 2008. I think we could have saved lots of lives from both sides. This conflict cost us a lot of people, a lot of blood, a lot of suffer, a lot of uncertainty.
So
we
why
could
do
have
you
saved
think,
all of this.
in your analysis, why was it not received? Why was it not signed? I mean, the Israeli president was being looked into for corruption. Was that the real reason?
It was not the real reason. I think maybe Tzipi Livni convinced President Abbas. Tzipi Livni was competing against Mr. Olmert in a coming election.
Here in Israel.
She convinced him that it's better for him to sign with her and not for an exiting prime minister. Maybe the Americans, Condoleezza Rice at that time, also have seen a similar opinion. I think he was hesitating, President Abbas. He was not confident, and he received these opinions from both Tzipi Livni and Condoleezza Rice, and it affected his decision. And maybe I think President Abbas himself does not have the courage to put his signature on any paper that ends with ending of claims. Maybe he does not want to put his signature on something that ends the claims. That's it. That's the end of the conflict. No one side can then come in the future, not in 1 year, not in 10 years, to say, well, I have more claims. That's it, once and forever. I think he is not built up to take such a courage decision. All these reasons have led to losing this opportunity. I hope that in the future, if something similar happens, the Palestinian people will have more courageous leaders, younger, people who understand more the conflict
Well, let me
in a
ask you
practical way.
then about sort of the next step. While the international community keeps talking about a two-state solution, both the current Israeli government and Hamas's leadership in Gaza are refusing that. Do you still believe that that is a realistic scenario and that that's something that's worth striving for?
Well, there was an interesting poll organized by an Israeli think tank called Bonim. And Bonim is led by Cholata, who was the head of the National Security Council. He's the a former National Security Advisor. And according to this poll, 58% of the Israeli Jewish population rejects the idea of a Palestinian state. And when they asked about the reason, 45% out of the 58% said for security reason. 13% only said for ideology reason. So most of the rejection of the idea of a Palestinian state comes from the Israeli Jewish population out of security concerns. If we deal with these security concerns, there will be popular acceptance inside the Israeli society to such an option. And then this will reflect itself on the coming political elite. Currently, Prime Minister Netanyahu and his coalitions are those who are connecting more to the ideology part of rejecting the Palestinian state. But most of the Israelis, it's only a security issue. If we, the Palestinians, can accommodate these security fears and concerns, we will encourage the Israelis to endorse the two-state solution. I think the majority of Israelis, the majority of Palestinians are really keen to go into a settlement based on a two-state solution on the borders of 67.
All right, well,
we need just to...
Yes, finish.
So we need just to be able to create more understanding on the obstacles, why the rejections to this option is happening now. It is basically the issue of the security. And I'm sure the coming elections in Israel and in Palestine will be over the issue of the two-state solution. It's going to be a campaign that is based on whether to go ahead to the two-state solution or to block this option.
Right.
I'm very much optimistic. I think we have no other way, because if not a two-state solution, then what's the alternative? The alternative is chaos, is a continuous violence and suffer for both people. And taking into consideration that the Israeli population is looking forward to have his own Jewish and democratic state, the only way to achieve a real Jewish and democratic state is separation from millions of Palestinians. So this is a scenario that has 100% interest on both sides. We need leadership. Again, another Olmert to come and stand up, and a partner,
Another
not
Olmert.
like Abbas from the Palestinian side, that would put his hand in the hand of an Israeli leader that will choose this direction. I'm optimistic that the coming election will produce such leadership on both sides.
All right, Samer Sinijlawi, good to hear an optimistic voice in this dark time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And for the studio here, we have just 1 minute before we have to move on. Is the population in Israel and is the population in Gaza ready for the next step?
I don't think so. I would dampen the lift. First of all, I really admire Mr. Summers' optimism. He mentioned the poll that was taken here in Israel, but he didn't talk about polls in the Palestinian Authority. How many in the Palestinians accept a Jewish independent state with a two-state solution, with the end of claims, the end of conflict? I'm not sure we will see a majority there.
The vast majority in the West Bank would say no. Gaza, I would say 50-50. That's according to latest polls.
All right, so we'll just have to see. Now, shifting gears, as Ramadan approaches, merchants and shoppers in Egypt are facing significant price hikes due to global crises like the Ukraine and Gaza wars. Now, despite this, there is cautious optimism that the country's economy may recover. Alex Schloss reports.
Just days ahead of the start of Ramadan, the old markets of Saida Zainab in Cairo prepare to welcome the Muslim fasting month. But this year, beneath the surface of tradition, there's an unmistakable worry: steep price tags, a reminder of the growing economic challenges facing the country.
Prices are 30 to 35% higher than last year. I can't deny that goods are expensive this year, as we have some imported items priced in US dollars. I'm not the one importing them. Traders do, and we buy the goods from traders at increased prices.
The rising prices aren't just limited to the lanterns, however. Essential items for Ramadan, like dates, dry fruits, and nuts, are also seeing dramatic price hikes, aggravated by global crises from Ukraine to the Gaza Strip.
The ongoing wars, especially between Russia and Ukraine, as well as the Israeli war in Gaza, have affected prices across everything, not just lanterns, but also clothing and other goods.
Prices have been mainly affected by the situation in Gaza. We wish for peace there, and in Egypt as well, as we fear for them and for ourselves.
With the fragile ceasefire holding on Egypt's bordering Gaza Strip, tourism returning, and ships resuming their transit through the Suez Canal, there's a glimmer of hope that the Egyptian economy may be on its way towards recovery.
And we're going out now for a quick break, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to discuss the situation in Syria, the Europeans and the US interest in Syria. We're going to discuss the 3 years of Russia's invasion to Ukraine, invasion of Ukraine, and the role of the Middle East in all of this. Lots more to unpack when we're back in just a few minutes.
Copper, heat therapy, cold therapy, Theralite warm-up, microcurrent tech, extension handle. This is the ProSage Thermo Copper, the latest percussion massage gun tech advancement available from Evertone. The ProSage Thermo Copper is the only 6-in-1 percussion massage gun with warm-up technology, hot and cold therapy, microcurrent, and now are you ready for this? The benefits of copper. Get deep muscle warm-up technology and a professional athlete-level massage for full body recovery and relief. Back in 2018, Evertone's invention of the ProSage created the craze in the market for advanced professional-level percussion massage. Featured on The Talk, Entertainment Tonight, CNN, and others, the ProSage Thermo Copper 6-in-1 is a powerful percussion massager with our patented Theralite warm-up technology, advanced copper head therapy with unique copper benefits, our proprietary heat therapy head for deep muscle penetration, and the cold therapy head for soreness and inflammation. Microcurrent tech for pain recovery and restoration, and it even comes with our newest extension handle, so you can reach anywhere on your body. This makes the cordless ProSage Thermo Copper 6-in-1 with 5 unique massage heads the most advanced professional level massage gun available. The gold standard in massage guns is now the ProSage Thermo Copper with targeted pain relief.
יש לך שתי ברירות, או לבחור בחיים, או להיכנס לדיכאון.
אתם נמצאים במקום לא פשוט.
שזה נקרא בעצם צד של אבל.
תחושה של הלכו לי החיים, ואני לא יודע לאן אני הולך.
Our heroes have sacrificed their life for us, and the people of Israel owe them everything. This Purim, by donating 15,000 Mishlochei Manot baskets, we will support 5 important rehabilitation projects for our 15,000 wounded. Thanks to Meir Panim, we won't have any cost for the baskets, so 100% of your donations will go directly to these projects. Donate now, and together we will give our heroes the love they deserve. Am Yisrael Chai.
Welcome back. You're watching Middle East Now, and I'm your host, Bianca Zanini. The European Union has begun easing sanctions against Syria. Earlier today, energy and transport sanctions as well as banking restrictions were lifted as the bloc aims to fuel the economy of the war-torn country and help the Syrian population. Now, Europe began imposing increasingly restrictive sanctions on Syria in 2011 in response to the hard-handed actions of then-President Bashar al-Assad. In December, he was toppled in a whirlwind rebel offensive, and the EU has been eager to support the country's new leadership. But it says it will continue to monitor the developments in Syria. And joining me now is Hazem Al-Khabra, former senior advisor for the U.S. Department of State. Thank you very much for joining us. So let's start with the sanctions relief here. A victory for al-Shura, who has been pushing for this. What are the conditions, though, for this relief?
I don't personally see it as a victory for Shara personally. It's a victory for the Syrian people who suffered under these sanctions. Unfortunately, the Assad regime, prior to Shara taking over, was able to go around these sanctions continuously by dealing with Iran, Russia, and other rogue actors in the region. Now these sanctions are really affecting the Syrian economy that is reeling with the lack of investments, lack of foreign currency. So this is good for the Syrian people, but I don't think it should be seen as a political victory because the purpose of the lifting of the sanctions was a relief to the Syrian people themselves.
All right, so we've got sort of a rapprochement or an opening, a softening from the Europeans. We also know that al-Shura has been invited to participate in this big summit, this Arab League summit next week, where they're going to discuss and at some point present their plan for the future of Gaza. Now, this is quite an important acceptance gesture from them to al-Shura. What can we expect to hear from him at the summit?
This is also something I do not see fully as a political endorsement as much as a technical issue. Syria has a huge number of Palestinian refugees, and some leadership of Palestinian factions still exists in Syria. So there is a is the natural representative for the country today to go and discuss these issues and the future and how the future of Gaza would not only affect the whole region, but affect the Palestinian population within Syria that still carry refugee status technically.
So essentially, it's more of a technical thing you're saying as a technical gesture than an actual political gesture. And yet, it is still sort of an acknowledgement from the Europeans, from the Arab countries. What about from the U.S.? Where does Trump stand on this new Syrian government?
Well, let's make no mistake. Shara is the de facto leader of Syria, for the time being at least. And any entity that wants to deal with Syria will have to go through him. The U.S. is a lot more bashful than other countries. The conversations are taking place. There are talks with Shara, but you have to remember that the U.S. also has a new administration, and we don't have an assistant secretary for Near Eastern Affairs at the State Department just yet. We don't have a deputy assistant secretary for Syria. So the people that need to be helping make the big decisions are not on the ground yet in Washington. And that requires some time, maybe a month or so before the new administration in the U.S. ramps up its Syria team to be able to, affect the decision, essentially.
Now, currently, there are about 2,000 American troops in Syria, which Trump has said he wants to remove. This could have a range of consequences, which we will dive into here in the studio. But what would this mean specifically for Syria?
This is one of the toughest problems right now. On one hand, the Kurds in northeast Syria have been a true partner of the United States. They are essentially brothers in arms. They fought ISIS successfully with the U.S. forces for years. We cannot, as the United States, abandon the Kurds just for the sake of withdrawing troops. It's under discussion right now. Trump obviously does not want American presence in all over the world engaged in conflicts. However, we're not just going to pack our bags and leave. We're encouraging the Kurds and obviously Shara and his government to engage in a productive discussion. We've seen the fruits of that discussion starting to appear, but it will take time. And again, I do not see this administration, the U.S., abandoning our partners for no good reason.
All right, Hazem Al-Kabrak, thank you very much for your analysis and your input this evening. Now, Israel will not accept the presence of Syrian government forces in southern Syria. That's the latest message from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, demanding the area be demilitarized. He also made it clear that Israeli troops will stay in parts of southern Syria for an indefinite period, maintaining the established buffer zone as long as necessary. Let's take a listen.
In Syria, IDF forces will remain at the Hermon summit and buffer zone area for an indefinite period in order to protect our communities and thwart any threat. We will not allow forces of the HTS or the new Syrian army to enter the territory south of Damascus. We demand full demilitarization of southern Syria in the provinces of Quneitra, Dar'a and Suwaida from the new regime's forces. In addition, we will not tolerate any threat to the Druze sect in southern Syria.
Now, since the fall of longtime dictator Bashar al-Assad in December, Israel sent troops to the border area, including in and around the existing buffer zone, in order to protect the nearby communities. Syrian authorities have not yet responded to Netanyahu's statement, but the country's new leader, Ahmed al-Shura, has demanded the IDF leave, but he's also made it clear he does not want conflict with Israel. Now, still with me in the studio is Balir and Danny. What is the message Netanyahu is sending here, that Israel won't accept Syrian forces there, they need to demilitarize, and why is it something that Israel is choosing to say right now?
Yes, maybe Danny will give us more on the intention from the Israeli side, but let's talk also about the reaction from the Syrian side. Now, today, many Syrians, hundreds, I would say, even thousands in the governorate of Dar'a, Suwaida and Quneitra, so every governorate that is south of Damascus, they took the street in order to protest those comments by Netanyahu calling on the Israeli troops to leave the area, and some even used anti-Semitic slogans and the chants about the Jews and all of that, which indicates, of course, the sentiment among the Syrians to those comments, to the Israeli presence there that they call, of course, occupation. By the way, the Suwaida governorate had limited protests. Now, I'm not sure whether we're going to see more protests tomorrow, but going back to Netanyahu's comment about the Druze and the fact that the Israelis will not tolerate any attack on the Druze in that area. He called them our brothers in Syria. Today, military council in Suwaida, which is a newly founded body, said in a statement that we welcome any offer to protect our people. but it's not clear. That's something that I wanted to understand from a Syrian source in the Golan. It's not clear how much popularity they have. They have been just newly founded, and I'm not sure whether this is the position for all the other Druze in the area, that they welcome the Israelis to protect them. We know, of course, about the collaboration between the Druze and many in the south of Syria over the past decade, Operation Good Neighbor, and so forth, and so that, okay. So, which means that we're not clear about how much the Syrians there, the Druze people, are welcoming those comments, but at least what we see today, many protests against those comments by Netanyahu.
Excuse me. These are the population, the people.
Right.
We need to take some water.
Yes, has said he doesn't want conflict with Israel.
Right.
So why now?
Well, I'll tell you from, Bianca, from Israel's point of view, until the situation is stabilizes in Syria, and right now the unknown looms much harder, much bigger than what is known. From Israel's point of view, there are two main factors that keeps us securing this buffer zone. The first one, of course, is that there's no trust whatsoever in the Ashara government. And although we see that he has been invited to Europe and not yet to the United States, but we cannot forget that he is Al-Qaeda. He was an Al-Qaeda leader during the 9th of September, and he has not renounced Al-Qaeda yet. So I think that the burden of the proof is on him. And unless and until he will renounce Al-Qaeda altogether, until and unless he renounces violence and terrorism altogether, and maybe calls even for a rapprochement with Israel, we cannot take any risk on the one hand. On the other hand is that since he has not stabilized his regime, it could still fall prey into two major forces, either the Iranians, on the eastern side, or the Iraqi or the Shia militias in Iraq, or on the western side, Turkey. So Israel at this point cannot take any risks, certainly not after the 7th of October. So what we're doing is we're saying we are there indefinitely. Why do we say indefinitely? Because we have to give some hope and some stability to the people there, mostly to the Druze. If Israel doesn't say that, then we will not see the Druze come out, or maybe even some Sunnis over there come out in cooperation with Israel. So I think right now Israel has a very clear policy, securing its border, I would say cooperating and enhancing cooperation with its allies in Syria, and waiting to see what the developments are. And again, the burden of the proof is Al-Shara. Right now, I think people are running, or the international community is running towards him without asking anything in return.
All right. Thank you for that analysis. Today marks 3 years since Russia invaded Ukraine, launching what was supposed to be a lightning strike operation, but which turned into a war of attrition. As talks of a possible end to the war emerge in the wake of US President Donald Trump, I-24 News looks back over the last 12 months of fighting to see how we got here.
Ukraine's third year fighting to repulse the Russian invasion started badly, marked in mid-February by the fall of Avdiivka. If the first year of war was characterized by Russia overreaching, and the second by Ukraine failing to convert defensive wins into offensive success, then the last 12 months of combat have demonstrated Russia's advantages in attritional warfare.
The Horde has a ratio of around 1 to 20 over us. This morning, about 70 people assaulted our brigade's position simultaneously. This is normal for the Russians.
March and April saw theoretical setbacks for Russia. with Sweden's ascension enlarging NATO to 32 states, and the White House approving a months-delayed $61 billion aid package for Ukraine, easing Kyiv's ammunition shortages, but not its lack of manpower. But in May, Russia opened a new front, massing from behind its international border to try push to within artillery range of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city.
There was yet another attack on Kharkiv today with more than 10 missiles. Several locations were hit, including a supermarket full of people.
Kyiv complained restrictions on its use of Western weapons against targets inside Russia were to blame, but ultimately reined in the attack. It launched a surprise offensive of its own in August, seizing territory in the Kursk region, the first invasion of Russia by a foreign power since World War II. Such a move, it was hoped, would draw Russian resources away from the Eastern Front lines and could act as leverage in any negotiated end to the war.
The operation in the Kursk region is part of the plan I'll speak about with President Biden. The main point of this plan is to force Russia to end the war, to end on fair terms for Ukraine.
The following month, Russian President Vladimir Putin flew to Mongolia, flouting the international arrest warrant filed against him by the International Criminal Court. Through the months of autumn, Russia made gains on the battlefield too, its forces slowly inching forward, despite heavy casualties. While both sides always need more combat recruits, it's Russia that is having more success acquiring fresh fighters. High starting salaries for Russians who volunteer for the army is one way the Kremlin achieves this. The deployment in October of North Korean infantry to counterattack in the Kursk region was another. Unaccustomed to modern warfare, let alone emerging weapons like drones, hundreds of the Koreans died fighting the Ukrainians.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
But it's a contest away from the battlefield that is shaping the direction of the war more than any other factor.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly. I will get the problem solved, and I will get it solved in rapid order, and it will take me no longer than one day.
As February came round once again, Washington signaled a rapid swerve in US policy towards Ukraine. With US and Russian diplomats meeting in Saudi Arabia for discussions that excluded both European allies and Ukraine itself. A maneuver that may force Kyiv to capitulate to a surrender it has repeatedly ruled out, or to fighting on isolated, without the backing of the world's most powerful military power.
Now, Russia's war in Ukraine heavily cemented the West in opposition to Russia, with the US and Europe imposing sanctions in attempts to isolate Moscow. Instead, the Russians found support elsewhere, moving closer to the Middle East, especially to Iran. But also Saudi Arabia and the UAE have helped negotiate prisoner exchanges. They've provided humanitarian assistance. Turkey hosted talks in the early months, and trade has gone up. So what is the role of the Middle East in this war and in solving it? Joining me now is Ksenia Svetlova, Senior Non-Resident Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thank you so much for joining us. So many Middle Eastern countries have really managed to stay neutral in the war, expressing concern and calling for dialogue in the international forums, but not necessarily taking it any step further, supporting Western sanctions or imposing their own. So before we get to how this war has impacted the Middle East, let's start with how the Middle East could impact the negotiations to end the war.
Yeah, well, it seems that countries like Saudi Arabia and, of course, Turkey, that it was the first Middle Eastern country to attempt a negotiation between Russia and Ukraine. This country could take a central stage precisely due to what they perceive, and perhaps others perceive, as neutrality and good relations with both parties. So while Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Turkey and others did not join the American and European-led sanctions on Russia. Most of them do comply with the sanctions. So, but at the same time, they are not shy from hosting in their capitals foreign ministers of Russia, delegations from Russia. And I think that they indicate quite clearly that Middle East is not part of this game. It's European, Western, maybe more European right now than generally Western issue, while they're there to be instrumental and to, wish for peace. Most of these countries do join the United States and Europe in resolutions over Ukraine that call for peaceful resolution and negotiations. And it seems that due to proximity of Saudi Arabia to the current American administration, precisely Riyadh will be very central, will play a leading role even in what might lead to eventually to negotiations between Russia and Ukraine.
All right, and Russia, though, has in the meantime become closer with Iran. How have the other countries in the region reacted to this, and why? What are we seeing here?
Well, I have to remind you that many countries in the region lately, in the last couple of years, made peace with Iran. And the first of them was Saudi Arabia, that with the help of China, another ally of Russia, was able to overcome the current difficulties and the challenges in their relations with the Iranians. I'm not saying that all of the issues are solved, and yet, if this rift would happen between Russia and Ukraine, and Russian turn to Iran 5 years ago, 7 years ago, when these countries were in the middle of this not so cold war against Iranians and were threatened by Iran, I think we could perhaps see a different attitude. But since we have the warming in the relations between UAE and, of course, Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region with Iran. So the reaction on behalf of these countries was rather muted. And most interestingly, Israel, the country that feels most threatened by Iran and that considers Iran its mortal enemy, that wishes to destroy it, did not react as harshly as it was supposed to and as many expected.
Now, I want to ask you, could this strengthening of the relationship between Tehran and Moscow have a larger scale effect on geopolitics and security? For instance, could it weaken the influence of the U.S. in trying to negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran? What are the large-scale implications here?
Well, it will depend on what U.S. has to offer to the Iranians, because currently I think that they achieved the level of integration with Russia that exceeds all their previous expectations. I mean, due to war, Russia, that became more secluded than ever, had no other alternatives but to turn to countries such as North Korea and Iran. And currently the trade is growing. Of course, the military production is growing substantially. And while it's not clear yet what is the policy of the new American administrations toward Iran, the Iranians know very clearly that Russia is not going anywhere. So I think that, ramifications for the Middle East are immense. We are talking not only about bilateral Iranian-Russian relations, but also support of Russia to Iranian proxies, such as the Houthis. And we have seen over the last year and a half a few indications that there is some help that is coming from the direction of Russia to the Houthis that strangled the international trade, that shot at Israel. And nevertheless, they received kind of help and assistance from the Russians with weapon technological assistance and perhaps many more. So these developments, they should be on the agenda of many Middle Eastern countries. It seems that many of them prefer to, talk about their different approaches and the challenges with Russia in a very quiet way, without taking it too far. But many understand that Russia is not going anywhere. And Russia is here in the Middle East to stay due to, first of all, American, I would say, disinterest and perhaps lack of initiative. Many perceive Russia and China as growing powers here to stay, and they're obliged to play with everyone. U.S., Russia and China, all the three of them.
All right, Ksenia Svetlova, thank you very much for your input and your analysis. Now, I want to bring this to the studio, of course, this bromance between the US, between Trump, Erdogan, Putin. Where does Israel stand in all of this?
Okay, so there are a few scenarios. First of all, with all due respect to Ksenia, my good friend, I don't think that Russia or China especially are on the rise. They both have enormous issues domestically. Russia, of course, still in the quagmire of Ukraine. I believe that one of the scenarios could be, since we see that there is a special relationship between Trump and Putin, that by favoring Putin's agenda on the Ukraine, there will be a quid pro quo, whereby Trump will demand from Putin an in-kind favor that means Iran. So there could be a trade, U.S. and Russia trading Ukraine for Iran. That means the U.S. supports Russia on Ukraine, and the Russians will join the U.S. on pressuring
It's
Iran.
all parts of a big puzzle. For you, Balir, here we just have 1 minute left. For you, what is the most important thing that Israel should be looking at right now?
Well, first of all, we have the Nagel committee that issued a report in the beginning of the year saying that the threat could come from Syria, but also from Turkey. They are suggesting to increase the defense budget for Israel for over 133 billion shekels over the next decade. That's in order to expand the IDF and also to add offensive and defensive capabilities. That's not coming in vain. The report itself saying that we must not forget the source from which the rebels, talking here about the Syrian rebels and their leaders, came from. Therefore, they could be, of course, imposing a threat. And the problem will intensify, according to the report, if the Syrian forces effectively become a Turkish emissary in Syria as part of the realizing of Turkey's dream of restoring the Ottoman crown or the Ottoman Empire. That's what the committee is saying. Now the government needs to implement it.
All right, Balir Sladin and Daniel Alon, thank you very much for your insights this evening. That's all for this episode of Middle East Now, but don't worry, we've got a full week ahead of us of the show with lots of news and analysis on Israel and the Middle East. I'm Bianca Zanini. Thank you for watching.
Copper, heat therapy, cold therapy, Theralite warm-up, microcurrent tech, extension handle. This is the ProSage Thermo Copper, the latest percussion massage gun tech advancement available from Evertone. The ProSage Thermo Copper is the only 6-in-1 percussion massage gun with warm-up technology, hot and cold therapy, microcurrent, and now are you ready for this? The benefits of copper. Get deep muscle warm-up technology and a professional athlete-level massage for full body recovery and relief. Back in 2018, Evertone's invention of the ProSage created the craze in the market for advanced professional-level percussion massage. Featured on The Talk, Entertainment Tonight, CNN, and others, the ProSage Thermo Copper 6-in-1 is a powerful percussion massager with our patented Theralite warm-up technology, advanced copper head therapy with unique copper benefits, our proprietary heat therapy head for deep muscle penetration, and the cold therapy head for soreness and inflammation. Microcurrent tech for pain recovery and restoration, and it even comes with our newest extension handle, so you can reach anywhere on your body. This makes the cordless ProSage Thermo Copper 6-in-1 with 5 unique massage heads, the most advanced professional-level massage gun available. The gold standard in massage guns is now the ProSage Thermo Copper with targeted pain relief.
שתי ברירות, או לבחור בחיים, או להיכנס לדיכאון.
אתם נמצאים במקום לא פשוט.
שזה נקרא בעצם צד של אבן.
תחושה של הלכו לי החיים, ואני לא יודע לאן אני הולך.
Our heroes have sacrificed their life for us, and the people of Israel owe them everything. This Purim, by donating 15,000 Mishlochei Manot baskets, we will support 5 important rehabilitation projects for our 15,000 wounded. Thanks to Meir Panim, we won't have any cost for the basket, so 100% of your donations will go directly to these projects. Donate now, and together we will give our heroes the love they deserve. Am Yisrael Chai.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing i24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News app today.
Israel is reportedly ready to release 602 Palestinian prisoners if Hamas immediately returns the bodies of 4 hostages with no staged humiliation ceremony, as seen in past releases. We'll discuss the halt in Phase 1 of the Gaza ceasefire. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulates Germany's Friedrich Merz on his party's win, as Merz vows to invite Netanyahu to Germany if he becomes the next chancellor, despite ICC arrest warnings. And the UK opposition leader is calling for a BBC probe into a documentary that features the son of Hamas leader in Gaza, with fears taxpayer money could have inadvertently gone to the terror group. The rundown on i24 News. I'm Nicole Zedek. Thanks for joining us this evening. Our top story right now is the future of the ceasefire in Gaza. Hamas says it will not engage in any negotiations on the next phase of the ceasefire until Israel releases the 602 Palestinian prisoners who were set to be freed on Saturday. But Israel is keeping them due to Hamas's cynical release ceremonies of Israeli hostages. This morning, Israel reportedly told mediators it would release the prisoners today if Hamas returns the 4 bodies of hostages still to be released in Phase 1. But Israel wants a commitment from Hamas no humiliation ceremony will take place. Meanwhile, the United States is openly pushing to extend the first phase of the deal amid reports Israel is looking to resume fighting in Gaza. Here's more details in this next report.
The United States is declaring for the first time that it's looking to extend the first phase of the ceasefire in Gaza. Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, is heading to Israel on Wednesday for talks.
We have to get an extension of Phase 1, and so I'll be going into the region this week, probably Wednesday, to negotiate that. And we're hopeful that we have the proper time to finish off, to begin Phase 2 and finish it off and get more hostages released and move the discussion forward.
The first phase of the ceasefire and hostage release deal is supposed to end on March 1st. Under the current framework, Phase 1 can be extended as long as the sides are engaged in negotiations over the second phase. Phase 2 envisions Hamas releasing all remaining hostages in exchange for thousands of Palestinian prisoners, a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, and a permanent end to the war. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reportedly stalled those talks, which were supposed to begin 3 weeks ago, Senior Israeli officials told I-24 News that a return to military action in Gaza is highly likely. The IDF raised its alert and readiness level along the Gaza border on Sunday.
We are prepared to resume intense fighting at any moment. Our operational plans are ready. Let me state our core policies. In Gaza, we have eliminated most of Hamas's organized forces. But let there be no doubt, we will fully achieve our war objectives.
Witkoff acknowledged that the terms of Phase 2 present a major dilemma. Israel wants its hostages freed, but does not want Hamas to remain in power. Israel has also halted the release of 602 Palestinian prisoners on Saturday, citing Hamas's humiliation of hostages. In response, the terror group is refusing to engage in further negotiations until those prisoners are freed.
Certainly bringing some mixed emotions to the Israeli public. And we want to go live now to Hostages Square. That's where our I-24 News correspondent Emmanuel Olnera is joining us from. Emmanuel, there's some fear within the Israeli public and specifically the family members of the remaining hostages that right now with this hiccup in Phase 1, Phase 2 talks, they have not even began. And so what are you hearing from some of the public right now about their concerns over the next few days when it comes to the ceasefire?
Right, Nicole, and the families of the released hostages from this Saturday are insisting that the deal must continue, and they're insisting because they still need to fight. They are seeing the need to fight in order to bring the now 63 hostages back, especially after hearing the harrowing details of their released loved ones, and also just behind me is the impact if these hostages aren't brought home. This is what their fears are. Behind me is this memorial of Shiri Bibas, Ariel and Kfir Bibas, her sons, the two young children, and of course Oded Lifshitz. We can see here, this is how the Israeli audience is paying tribute to these now 4 returned bodies, the returned bodies of these 4 hostages. The Israelis were hoping to have these Israelis come home, but unfortunately, this is the sad reality that the Israeli audience is now confronted to. And you can see here the candles that people here can come and have been lighting up throughout the evening. There are letters that are written for Kfir and Ariel Bibas. You can see milk bottles and, of course, the yellow flowers, the color yellow, which has been here as a symbol in the fight for the release of the hostages. And, of course, very notably, the color orange, symbolically representing the red hair of Ariel and Kfir Bibas, the color orange that has come to be such a strong symbol in the fight for the release of the Bibases. And this is now this new, sad, atrocious reality that Israelis have now to face. We know that the funeral for the Bibas is going to be on Wednesday. It's going to be a closed, private ceremony so that the families and close friends can say their goodbyes in the most private way possible. And now we know that the funeral of Oded Lifshitz is going to be tomorrow at Nir Oz Cemetery at 2 p.m. There will be a procession throughout parts of the country for the Bibases on Wednesday so that the Israeli public pay its own respects, pay tribute to these 3 family members, which have just destroyed the morale of the Israeli audience, Nicole.
A very powerful memorial there at Hostages Square. It truly speaks to the heartbreaking reality faced with these hostages right now. Emmanuel Olnera with that live report from Hostages Square. Thank you for your coverage. Joining me in studio to discuss the latest developments more, I'm joined now by Major General in Reserve Eitan Dangot, former military secretary to 3 Israeli defense ministers, as well as the former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories, also known as Kogat. as well as our I-24 News correspondent, Blair Thaddean. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us on The Rundown today. Now, Blair, I want to begin with you because throughout the day, many differing reports as far as the 4 bodies that are still set to be released in phase 1 of this ceasefire. They were supposed to be released on Thursday. Reports back and forth throughout the day that they could even be released tonight. What details do we know right now?
Yes, just to recap, the Israeli authorities delayed the release of the 602 Palestinian prisoners because Hamas held that ceremony that we've seen on Thursday for the bodies of the Israelis and for the fact, of course, that they have returned the body of Gazan women and not the body of Shiri Bibas. Now, apparently today Hamas is willing to release the bodies of the next round of Israeli hostages, the 4 that are left in this phase of the deal. Palestinian sources told El Sharq Al-Awsat newspaper that there is progress in the talks with the mediators to resolve this quote-unquote crisis. There are talks that may lead in the coming hours to the transfer of the bodies of 2 Israeli hostages in exchange for the release of the Palestinian prisoners that were supposed to be released back on Saturday. Now, Israeli sources told I-24 News that we don't know about any of such a solution for now, but later on, they were also saying that this is actually fake news and this is not true. Now we can understand, according to the latest report, that there is some sort of a compromise, that Israel will get back 2 bodies of the 4 Israeli bodies, Israeli hostages, that are supposed to be released on Thursday. In exchange for that, they will release 301, so half of the Palestinian prisoners to Gaza and the West Bank. But the only issue here is that Israel, or actually Hamas, wants that to happen simultaneously. Prisoners for bodies of hostages. But Israel is saying, last time you brought us the body of supposed to be Shiri Bibas, but it happened that it was not Shiri Bibas. So we need the bodies first to explain them, to clarify that they are, to identify, that they are the bodies of Israeli hostages, and then we will release the Palestinian prisoners. That's the main issue that is sticking point right now, but apparently we're getting closer to some sort of a resolve or a solution to this issue.
Resolve to some sort of a solution, but when it comes to the ceremonies that we've seen inside Gaza during the release of these hostages, Eitan, why are we seeing Israel now, during the last release in phase 1, come up in arms saying that these cynical ceremonies cannot continue because we've seen them for more than 6 weeks at this time? So could this possibly then change and actually have an impact on how Hamas does release future hostages?
First of all, we are in a very sensitive, in my opinion, 10 days. That will be the future of the hostages that are still alive inside the Gaza tunnels. Secondly, I think that the issue of the ceremonies is something very cynic. It's maybe give Hamas on the immediate time the feeling they show or demonstrate like their power, but this is show their poverty, their situation around like an area, like making, of course, a cinema film for making the way they would like to signal what they are doing. But as it's done more, I think it's damaging Hamas. And the last that we are now waiting for, the last stage of the first shift of releasing now 4 bodies, my private opinion, I'm not care, because Hamas will be punished by us. And in my opinion, they will be punished, the time will come, and because the war with Hamas will continue. Secondly, I think that Hamas is now in a very bubbling strategic situation around them, while they are assess what's going in Lebanon. They saw yesterday the situation of Hezbollah, with the way of Hezbollah that Lebanon government stand first time after thousands of years and demand things from Hezbollah organization, and it showed yesterday the weakness of Hezbollah and the great lose in the war. Secondly, they know their structural situation. Third, they understand that on the 4th of March will be the Arab League meeting in Cairo, while they are looking immediately to give an alternative program to what Trump put to the air about move of Palestinians from Gaza. And I think Hamas is now in their worst low situation, besides the thing that they are doing that. So in my opinion, the arrival to the area of Witkoff on coming Wednesday, Thursday, will be the beginning, but it will be in a limit time. We will know exactly where are we going. And the Israeli step to stop the release of the prisoners was a right step. But the question is still when. If they are coming and bringing back the 4 bodies and we will release the prisoners, the main thing is what will be after it. The main thing it will be whether Bibi Netanyahu is going by the pressure around Hamas to release all the hostages that are there, and the way how we are doing it without leaving completely Gaza or without declare of stopping the war. There are other things, the way to say it.
And today we did see some activity inside Gaza. The IDF stating that a rocket was launched from Gaza. It fell inside the Gaza Strip.
It's the second time that they tried to launch a rocket that fell inside Gaza. What does it mean? Unprofessionality, an individual rocket they find out. It shows exactly the situation of Hamas, in my opinion. And, of course, the Israeli IDF is still deployed in an area western to the border to defend between the people that are living in those places that were attacked on the 7th of October, between the Palestinians. In my opinion, it's much more important than to hold Philadelphia, to give this strip of secure to the people like we made in Lebanon. We are holding 5 posts inside Lebanon, and we don't have to respect exactly the agreement. We have to put the agreement on the situation of the threats.
Well, we're going to get to Lebanon in just a minute, but we did see
some... to do it in Gaza in the same way.
Yes, but we're going to expand our coverage there as well.
They are asking for Israeli full withdrawal from the Gaza Strip in phase 2.
Get it, and I think they will.
You will not get the hostages.
Balir, we also heard
let's say that, in my opinion, the situation of Hamas today is much more. Let's say they are much more in a pressure than they were in the past, because their mirror is the Arab League countries and what's going and the pressure from the United States. And this is a game changer.
And we're hearing regret coming from Hamas leaders today, in fact, when they talk about the position that they've been put themselves in. Balir, walk us through what we heard from one of the senior Hamas officials, these statements following the October 7th massacre.
Yes, very interesting statements. In fact, Musa Abu Marzouk, one of Hamas's senior officials that is or has been living in the United States for quite a long time, or actually he is now in Doha, but he lived in the United States for quite a long time. He's talking to New York Times today, saying that Hamas, if Hamas would have anticipated what happened in Gaza after October 7th, at least he himself would actually vote no or say no to this October 7th attack. That's what Musa Abu Marzouk is saying, but we haven't heard that from other Hamas's officials. But Musa Abu Marzouk gave us also more interesting statements in this interview with the New York Times. He talked about the fact that Hamas is willing to discuss any issue on the table, including the issue of complete disarmament. Now, the issue of complete disarmament is a red line for Israel for phase 2. Otherwise, Israel will not go for phase 2 and release all the hostages. That's what we heard from Musa Abu Marzouk. But just a week ago, Osama Hamdan, in a conference in Doha, said exactly the opposite, that this is out of question. We cannot compromise on that. There is no question that we will hold our arms. Now, there are some sort of solutions to this. Maybe putting the weapons that are in Gaza Strip in some facilities that are supervised by the Europeans, or some sort of that compromise. That is possible. I'm not sure about the Israeli position for that, but the issue of the complete disarmament, according to experts that talk to New York Times, this is out of question. This is unlikely.
Very interesting statements to come from that interview now. As I mentioned, we have to move on to news out of Lebanon now, because in Lebanon, Hezbollah has reportedly told its operatives who don't live south of the Litani River to vacate the area and allow the Lebanese armed forces to take control of the border with Israel. This according to the Wall Street Journal. Now, I spoke with Orna Mizrahi, senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies, earlier in the day to discuss Hezbollah's capabilities following the funeral of Hassan Nasrallah and the opportunity that could lie ahead for the new Lebanese government to finally break free from the arms of Iran. Here's more from our discussion. Orna Mizrahi. Orna, thank you for being with us on The Rundown today. Now, We're speaking just one day after Hassan Nasrallah's funeral in Beirut, just yesterday. And following that funeral, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun, he met with the Iranian parliament speaker. And during that meeting, Aoun said his country paid a heavy price for the Palestinian cause and is tired of others' wars. So what should we make of this messaging coming from the new Lebanese government pointed towards Iran right now?
It exposes, it exposes the situation of Iran and the total Shiite axis led by Iran in the region in the post-war era. They suffered a lot, and they are now at a crossroads, and they have to decide which way they are going. The Iranians are trying to strengthen the Hezbollah again, and that he will be as it was before the war. But a lot has been changed in Lebanon, and especially the Lebanese leadership after the war, because of the weakness of Hezbollah. They were elected. Hezbollah had no choice, and he was supporting the election of the president. They didn't want it and didn't like before. They didn't want him to be the president, but they had no other choice. And afterwards, the government, and of course they have a little representation in the government, but the force is very limited to influence what's going on in the Lebanese political system. It changed totally, and the Iranians try to change it back, but they have no. The president told them, I think, very vigorously, that it's not going to happen.
Yet still, Iran also during this meeting or afterwards said that Iran is still willing to help Lebanon in reconstruction efforts following the different ground invasion from Israel. So that does still show some sort of ties between both Iran and Lebanon.
Yeah, but the Lebanese don't want, the current Lebanese government doesn't want the help of Iran in the reconstruction, because they understand the reconstruction, if Iran is helping them to reconstruct the country, it means that Hezbollah stays there, and the money goes into the hands of Hezbollah, and the support of the population is going to be the same. The support for Hezbollah. They don't want the help of Iranian. They don't want the money that comes from the Iranian. They prefer to have the connection with the West. They prefer that the money will come from the international fund and from the US and the West, and they want to keep the relation with the West. And they don't want at all the help of Iran, because they understand its meaning. They don't want to be a protégé of Iran.
So what happens next for Hezbollah then? Because with Nasrallah's funeral, it seems like there was this closing of an era for Lebanon. But as far as Hezbollah, it might be badly hurt, but the terror group, it's still standing right now.
Yeah, they are, the organization is in its weakest point. It's very weak and defeated, both by the war with Israel and also by the fact that the Syrian regime collapsed. And the Syrian regime, Assad's regime, was very important for Hezbollah. Hezbollah was supporting Assad, and Assad led the Iranian to use its country to transfer all of the money, the weapons, and whatever they wanted from Iran to Hezbollah. And this is the way they built its military capabilities. And now all of these ways are blocked for him. Just last week, there was a decision of the government of Lebanon, the new government of Lebanon, to stop the flights from Iran, because there was information that I suppose was coming from US or Israel, that on these flights there is money, there are people that are delivering money for Hezbollah. So they stopped the flights from Iran. Could you imagine such an action happening in the pre-war era? So this is totally a new situation for Hezbollah. And this is why they are, as I said before, at crossroads. What is going to happen with them in the future? And this is why they are not retaliating for what Israel is doing during the last month.
It seems that Lebanon as a country has this opportunity to reclaim its country from the terror group. Now, Orna, this exact topic, everything that we're speaking about right now, is what you will also be discussing tomorrow, Tuesday, at the INSS 18th Annual International Conference in Tel Aviv University. You're going to be hosting a panel. What should our viewers know and what should they expect about that conference?
In the conference, we are going to cover a lot of issues, both regional and international, and whatever is related to the national security of Israel. In the panel that I'm taking part in, we will talk about the Shiite axis and its current situation and what are the implications and what are the challenges for the Shiite axis and the opportunities for Israel and for the region.
We'll also be live streaming the conference on our I-24 News website as well. Orna Mizrahi, thank you for breaking down the latest developments in Lebanon today.
Thank you, Nicole.
Interesting developments happening in Lebanon. As we reported earlier in the broadcast, Hezbollah reportedly asking their operatives, telling their operatives south of the Litani River to vacate the area if they're not residents there. Let the Lebanese armed forces come in and do the job. What is this messaging coming from Hezbollah to the Lebanese army?
Hezbollah is aware that they lose the battlefield with Israel according and including what they built as the structure in the south part of Lebanon. Let's say it's southern to the Litani River. And I think that by this way, they show that they are now centralized how to rebuild again the organization. It shows us the depth of the problem that Hezbollah has. No, they cannot get a lot of money to finance themselves, the steps that are done even by Lebanon country. Secondly, how to pay salaries to their families of fighters. The third, how they are going to build again the arm, while from the Syria border to Lebanon, there is a lot of mines after what happened in Syria. So they give the area of South Lebanon by understanding that in this stage, on this timetable, they are not able to create something, a threat from there to Israel. They prefer, and we are not have the right to leave it. We have to continue to attack offensively wherever we had intelligence, identification of moving arms, or sharing the intelligence like we did now with Lebanon. Secondly, I give like a warning not to be so happy from Lebanese step. We have to build it step by step. It's the first time that Lebanese government shows independent way to move out Hezbollah from their area, to create something new in the structure of in Beirut, on creating a new future for the Lebanese population. But you know the Iranian, you know the Hezbollah, they will not give it a long time till they will move. So what I mean is that we will have to press and to do with the Americans, with France, with Lebanese to support it and to try. I believe in something that is in a process that will take time. One thing, Israel has to not to be again on the 6th of October. Wherever there is something, we have the policy of defending, because in my opinion, my goal is to be aware that the population of the North returning back home and they will feel secure, protected, and not coming back to what happened before.
That is the reality that needs to happen. Major General in Reserves Eitan Dan-God and our I-24 News correspondent Belir Sladin stay with us here in studio. We are going out for a quick break here on The Rundown, but when we come back, we'll continue to discuss the latest developments, specifically with the latest elections in Germany. Stay with us in just 3 minutes. We'll be back here on The Rundown.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
Copper, heat therapy, cold therapy, Theralite warm-up, microcurrent tech, extension handle. This is the ProSage Thermo Copper, the latest percussion massage gun tech advancement available from Evertone. The ProSage Thermo Copper is the only 6-in-1 percussion massage gun with warm-up technology, hot and cold therapy, microcurrent, and now are you ready for this? The benefits of copper. Get deep muscle warm-up technology and a professional athlete-level massage for full body recovery and relief. Back in 2018, Evertone's invention of the ProSage created the craze in the market for advanced professional-level percussion massage. Featured on The Talk, Entertainment Tonight, CNN, and others, the ProSage Thermo Copper 6-in-1 is a powerful percussion massager with our patented Theralite warm-up technology, advanced copper head therapy with unique copper benefits, our proprietary heat therapy head for deep muscle penetration, and the cold therapy head for soreness and inflammation. Microcurrent tech for pain recovery and restoration, and it even comes with our newest extension handle, so you can reach anywhere on your body. This makes the cordless ProSage Thermo Copper 6-in-1 with 5 unique massage heads the most advanced professional-level massage gun available. The gold standard in massage guns is now the ProSage Thermo Copper with targeted pain relief.
Welcome back to The Rundown. On a surprising twist, the Alternative for Germany party nearly doubled its support in the country's national elections on Sunday, the strongest showing for a far-right party since World War II. Opposition leader Friedrich Merz's Conservatives were victorious, leaving Chancellor Olaf Scholz's center-left Social Democrats with a stinging defeat. Here's more.
Germany's Conservatives swept to victory in Sunday's elections. With their leader Friedrich Merz set to become the next chancellor, the far-right Alternative for Germany, or AfD, came in second place in the strongest showing for a far-right party since World War II. AfD gains are attributed to fears over immigration and security after a spate of deadly attacks blamed on asylum seekers.
We doubled our numbers. What people voted for is a shift in the political direction which Germany is heading. They want to have a change in politics, and the role of AfD in the next parliament will be very clear. We will address the problems. We will propose the solutions.
Merz's alliance won more than 28%, crushing the Social Democrats, which attained a historic low of 16%. Merz, a longtime party rival of ex-Chancellor Angela Merkel, has vowed a crackdown on irregular immigration, hoping to win back votes from AfD, whose rise has stunned many in a country that is still trying to atone for its dark Nazi past, arguing that the next government must boldly address the AfD's concerns on migration and fix the ailing economy, warning that otherwise the far right might win next time around.
If this government is not able to address the issues which are at stake and which are mobilizing people to go and vote for the AfD, which is especially the migration issue, then we will see a further rise of this party.
German elections have come amid tectonic upheaval in U.S.-Europe ties sparked by U.S. President Donald Trump going over the heads of European leaders to end the ongoing Ukraine war. And the AfD has basked in the support of Trump allies, with billionaire Elon Musk praising it as the only party that can, quote, save Germany. For now, the party is set to stay in opposition.
Democratic parties have agreed on keeping the firewall between them and the AfD for the next time.
Short of a majority in an increasingly fragmented political landscape, Merz will have to forge a new coalition government in Europe's top economy. With no previous government experience, Merz has promised to provide greater leadership than outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz and to liaise more with key allies, restoring Germany to the heart of Europe.
Israeli politicians were quick to congratulate Friedrich Merz on his win, with both Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar taking to social media to voice their praise for the likely new chancellor. Well, for more, we are joined now by Polina Garayev, our I-24 News Europe correspondent, joining us from Berlin. Polina, now, Merz, he has been a staunch supporter of Israel throughout the course of this war, and these are pretty differing views than the outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Let's talk about kind of where their different beliefs and where the different party lines stand.
Well, of course, it should be stressed that support for Israel is always has been and will be part of the German political mainstream. And there's no party, even if the SPD or the Social Democrats remain in power, this was never in question. However, it's clear that Friedrich Merz is much more of an outspoken supporter of the Netanyahu government and of Israel in general. And this was already became clear after the first conversation that they had, in which reportedly Merz invited Netanyahu to visit Israel and made sure that, and he said that he would make it possible despite the arrest warrants against Netanyahu. This is something that the previous government was, let's say, less clear about. We heard the soon-to-be former foreign minister of Germany, Annalena Baerbock, say that nobody is above the law, and she said that it's possible that such a visit will at least not be possible, or that Israel might need to, or sorry, that Germany might need to even arrest Netanyahu, as hard as this to believe. The spokesperson of the government, Scholz's spokesperson, was less equivocal. So this was something that was a bit of an issue. Merz, the first thing that he said in regards to Israel and his relations with Netanyahu was that Netanyahu is always welcome in Germany. So this is already a clear signal. He also said that when it comes to arms exports to Israel, something that, although not officially stopped during the last couple of months, did, if you look at the numbers, did come to a bit of a standstill. This is something that Merz made it clear when he's speaking of the topic, that the arms exports will continue, that Israel will have all the support that it needs from Germany. So this is much more of a stronger show of support of coming from Germany, even though, of course, as it should be said, his party also supports a two-state solution. They will, of course, we can expect them to continue being fairly critical of any sort of future settlement expansion. But overall, this new German government will definitely be good news for Israel.
Now, it seems all people are pointing that Merz is going to be the likely new chancellor, but is there also a chance that Merz cannot form a government and will not become the new chancellor?
Well, then the alternative would be a new election. This is something that Germany would like to avoid, especially if they're already seeing a snap election, an early election in Germany, something that happened, if I'm not mistaken, only 3 times in the past, often leading to the re-election of the incumbent. Scholz, I believe, is the second chancellor to take this gamble, to call for a new election and lose. This, I should say, was to be expected. The results that we are seeing are very consistent with the polls that have been published over the last couple of months since the campaign began, including this great achievement, this win by the AfD coming in second place. This, again, also been predicted. While it is, of course, very troubling news, it's not exactly surprising. They've been polling in second place for a while now. This, of course, right now, Merz's priority is forming a government with the Social Democrats, with Scholz's former party. He already announced announced that he will not seek any sort of ministerial roles in this new government, but they are the likely coalition partner. If those coalition negotiations fail, then there are not too many alternatives. Germany now has a bitter experience with its one and only three-way coalition government that collapsed because of infighting and disagreements regarding policies, and particularly the budget. So right now, another grand coalition, a unity government between the Conservatives and the Social Democrats is Germany's best bet to restore stability and its position in international politics. The two seem to be related. As soon as it manages to recover economically, believes that it will also be able to restore its position politically. So right now, the priority here in Germany is to form a coalition as soon as possible, and the best chance to do that is to form an agreement with the Social Democrats. How much both parties, the Conservatives and the Social Democrats, are able to compromise and strike a middle ground, that we're going to see over the next couple of weeks.
Major changes could certainly be coming out of Germany. Polina Garayev live in Berlin. Thank you for that update. Now, meanwhile, elsewhere in Europe, it has been 3 years ago this week that Russia invaded Ukraine, launching what was billed to be a lightning strike operation that since ground into a war of attrition. As talks of possible end to the war emerge in the wake of U.S. President Donald Trump, I-24 News takes a look over the last 12 months of fighting. Our correspondent Robert Swift has more.
Ukraine's third year fighting to repulse the Russian invasion started badly, marked in mid-February by the fall of Avdiivka. If the first year of war was characterized by Russia overreaching, and the second by Ukraine failing to convert defensive wins into offensive success, then the last 12 months of combat have demonstrated Russia's advantages in attritional warfare.
The horde has a ratio of around 1 to 20 over us. This morning, about 70 people assaulted our brigade's position simultaneously. This is normal for the Russians.
March and April saw theoretical setbacks for Russia, with Sweden's ascension enlarging NATO to 32 states, and the White House approving a months-delayed $61 billion aid package for Ukraine, easing Kyiv's ammunition shortages, but not its lack of manpower. But in May, Russia opened a new front, massing from behind its international border to try push to within artillery range of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city.
There was yet another attack on Kharkiv today with more than 10 missiles. Several locations were hit, including a supermarket full of people.
Kyiv complained restrictions on its use of Western weapons against targets inside Russia were to blame, but ultimately reined in the attack. It launched a surprise offensive of its own in August, seizing territory in the Kursk region, the first invasion of Russia by a foreign power since World War II. Such a move, it was hoped, would draw Russian resources away from the eastern front lines and could act as leverage in any negotiated end to the war.
The operation in the Kursk region is part of the plan I'll speak about with President Biden. The main point of this plan is to force Russia to end the war, to end on fair terms for Ukraine.
The following month, Russian President Vladimir Putin flew to Mongolia, flouting the international arrest warrant filed against him by the International Criminal Court. Through the months of autumn, Russia made gains on the battlefield too, its forces slowly inching forward, despite heavy casualties. While both sides always need more combat recruits, it's Russia that is having more success acquiring fresh fighters. High starting salaries for Russians who volunteer for the army is one way the Kremlin achieves this. The deployment in October of North Korean infantry to counterattack in the Kursk region was another. Unaccustomed to modern warfare, let alone emerging weapons like drones, hundreds of the Koreans died fighting the Ukrainians.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
But it's a contest away from the battlefield that is shaping the direction of the war more than any other factor.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly. I will get the problem solved, and I will get it solved in rapid order, and it will take me no longer than one day.
As February came round once again, Washington signaled a rapid swerve in with US and Russian diplomats meeting in Saudi Arabia for discussions that excluded both European allies and Ukraine itself. A maneuver that may force Kyiv to capitulate to a surrender it has repeatedly ruled out, or to fighting on isolated, without the backing of the world's most powerful military power.
Back here in the region, in the West Bank, the Jenin municipality claims Israel completely demolished 120 homes and damaged dozens of others as the IDF operation intensifies in the northern West Bank. The IDF says it detained 8 wanted Palestinians during overnight raids in Jenin and Kafin. The military also detained 2 Palestinians near Ramallah for allegedly attacking and injuring 2 Israelis, as the suspects were armed with clubs, a knife, and stones. Now, other reports, however, say the incident sparked from clashes between settlers and Palestinians, and 3 Palestinians were also injured. Still with me in studio, Major General in Reserves Eitan Dangot, as well as our I-24 News correspondent, Balir Sladin. Eitan, right now with this West Bank operation, 120 homes reportedly demolished, completely beyond repair. What is the purpose of this, specifically in Jenin, as the IDF is expanding its operation?
I think that one of the main threats that has growth up in the last month, that has already signs before, is the threat that is coming from the West Bank. And why? Because Israel succeeded to destroy, to break the structure, as we said before, of Hezbollah and also of Hamas. And where we are now, we are in a stage of guerrilla fight. And in this place, I think that Hezbollah and also some extremist Sunnis movements like Daesh and the others are making a lot of efforts in order to pass or to create a new threat to Israel that is coming from area like the West Bank. And what does this guerrilla? It has a lot of charges that are bringing from abroad. What happened in Batya a few days ago at the night in the buses area, while 3 to 5 were with charges inside, and we had a great miracle that night, shows the threat that is coming from that place. And in this case, we have to cut it as soon as possible, because it will be impact to other areas as well. Secondly, we have 500,000 of Israeli civilians that are living in the West Bank, in Area C, very close to Jerusalem. You are also very close to the Ramadan time, which is used by those people in order to create a kind of terror, a wing towards Israel. So what is done by Israel is identify main places of terrorism, like laboratories, because it's changing the map, it's changing the way of a concept, tactics, and a concept they are using, how to kill and to murder. So what we are doing now is a special activities against the area of the north part of the West Bank, especially in 3 places, in Tulkarem, in the area of Noa Shams, and also in Jenin area. And this has brought us to use arms that we generally didn't use in the West Bank, and we are doing right. And there is a lot of battalions also that were arrived to the West Bank recently. We have to remember this weekend starts the Ramadan. So in my opinion, a very important mission on the IDF. It is the center now of the battlefield that IDF is facing. We have to do it quick, without making any doubt to anybody there, to stay alive whether they are murderers, and to bring the area completely to understand that we will not allow this kind of terrorism to grow up and to risk again the interior part in Israel and also the West Bank and Jerusalem. Last but not least, Jerusalem is coming to be again in the Ramadan time one of the main sensitive places. And what we are doing now is a pre-activities in order to prevent it in the coming weeks.
This mission also is already gaining international condemnation, not surprisingly, from United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres. Also, not so surprisingly, from the Red Cross as well. Balir, could this international condemnation have any real impact on Israel's military moves?
Well, just like it did not actually impact on the Israeli decisions in Gaza, it will not actually have much more impact on the West Bank. It's mainly because of the 40,000 Palestinians that needed to leave their homes. Now, we've seen that the operation is expanding. Of course, we've seen that even tanks are being used right now, only for a tactical purpose. It's not for a tactical purpose because we're talking about a small number of tanks. It's more for the psychological effect of that. What we have done in Gaza, we will do in the West Bank. Now, according to my, to the extent of my understanding, I'm not a military expert, this needs at least 2 divisions in order to deal with the 2,000 plus operatives that operate in the north of the West Bank. That's a number that Israel, at least for now, does not have because of the readiness that the IDF is preparing for the offensive in Gaza in case the deal with Hamas does not go through to the second phase of the deal. The defense minister, Israel Katz, said that Israel will not leave those areas. We know that over the past few years, Israel has been carrying out sort of raids inside those camps, dealing with the operatives there, arresting them, killing them, and then get out of that. Exactly at the time where they get out, the operatives will go back, just those that left the camps. That's why 2 divisions are needed there. Now, Israel Katz is saying that 3 military outposts will be built inside those areas. The residents will not be allowed to go back to their homes. That's angering a lot of Palestinians there, especially toward the Palestinian Authority, and that's why we're hearing today Nadim Abu Ordeni, which is the spokesperson for the Palestinian Authority, condemning the operation and saying that this is a continuation of what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip, and such condemnation from Abu Ordeni. That's exactly what Israel is doing right now in the West Bank. Apparently, it will continue to be there with the Israeli military presence until the 2,000 operatives there are dealt with some way or another.
A turbulent hotspot indeed when it comes to the West Bank. Balir Sladin and Major General in Reserves Eitan Dangot, thank you both for your analysis as always. Now, elsewhere in the region, as Turkey strengthens its foothold in the Middle East, it's also challenging Russian influence. This shift is highlighted by ongoing diplomatic exchanges, particularly regarding the war in Ukraine and the evolving power dynamics between Moscow and Ankara. Our Alex Schloss reports.
As Russian influence in the Middle East recedes, Turkish dominance is accelerating. From the fall of the Russian-backed Assad regime to the Turkish-backed HTS militia to the dual governments in Libya, Turkey is exercising its sway as a resurgent regional and perhaps global power. This week, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visited Ankara to discuss the war in Ukraine on the 3rd anniversary of the Russian invasion.
Today, as the war enters its 4th year, there is an initiative launched by the US that aims to end the war through negotiations. This situation coincides with the policy we have been following since the beginning of the war.
At the same time, Syrian Foreign Minister Assad Ashbani is also in Ankara to address the situation in his country, an issue at the top of the docket between Moscow and Ankara.
In the period before the political leadership change in Syria, the U.S. military presence played a negative role. It was a presence without any official invitation from the legitimate authorities.
Now, the new legitimate authorities in Damascus are not beholden to their patrons in Russia, but rather the Erdogan government in Turkey. And Moscow will have to navigate its relationship with Ankara to maintain its interests in Syria, namely a key Russian Mediterranean port in Tartus.
As for Syria, are there any agreements on Russia's usage of its naval military base in Tartus? Is there a risk that Russia may lose access that will significantly impact operations in the Mediterranean Sea?
As you know, our delegation has recently conducted negotiations in Damascus. We agreed to continue contacts on all of the issues. There are lots of topics to discuss. We will continue dialogue on all of the issues.
As Turkish influence expands, other countries with vested interests in the region will have to deal with the growing influence of Turkey as a major power broker.
Now, after the BBC removed a documentary called Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone, that was narrated by the son of a Hamas leader in Gaza, UK opposition leader Kemi Badenoch is calling for a BBC probe into the documentary to find out if it may have funded the terror group. For more, I'm joined in studio by our I-24 News correspondent Joe Brown. Joe, right now, why is Badenoch presenting these claims in the first place? What does she think is wrong with this already controversial documentary?
Yes, the documentary was called Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. It was aired a couple days ago on the BBC and then put on the BBC's streaming service, iPlayer. As soon as it was released, a journalist, David Collier, did a deep dive into it because he felt that the BBC has been very anti-Israel in its coverage of the last 16 months and also in general. And he decided to have a deeper look into who the people who were there. So this is a story that's following a couple of young children, teenagers, as they try and navigate the Israel-Gaza war. And it's narrated by the person you can see on the screen. He is called Abdullah. He was 13 years old when it was produced. He's now 14 years old. And he was presented as your standard everyday Gazan teenager. However, they omitted the fact, whether this was intentional omission or the fact they didn't actually realise, that his father is the Deputy Minister for Agriculture in Gaza, which is obviously a Hamas-run government. So they didn't mention the fact that he is a son of a Hamas politician, and not just that, a couple of the other children have links to Hamas. Either they are often presented alongside Hamas, they're given weapons and they pose alongside them, or they are the children of people in the Gazan police, which is also, of course, run by Hamas. And this is where the larger issue is. The BBC wanted to show what life is like inside Gaza, but the issue is Gaza is a totalitarian state which is run by Hamas. So similar to the way you can't get a documentary about North Korea that isn't approved by the North Korean government, you can't get anything out of Gaza that doesn't pass through Hamas. This includes their journalists from Al Jazeera. Everything from there is run by Hamas. So the issue with the documentary was the fact that this was presented through the lens of the Hamas leadership. And David Collier, the journalist who discovered this, he said that it took 3 hours, only 3 hours of research, just by going through the Facebooks of the people who were involved. And this even includes the cameraman who said some positive things on October the 7th. It just took him 3 hours and he was able to decipher what the true meaning of the
some people are saying it was just lazy journalism on the part of the BBC, but there could be a bigger political messaging behind Badenoch's reasoning for bringing about this push for the probe.
Yes, so the BBC is funded by the UK taxpayer through what is called a licence fee. This is around about £170 a year. And this is used to fund the BBC's programming for entertainment, for sports, for everything. Now, the Conservative Party, they are the centre-right party in the UK. They believe in lowering taxes, so lowering the licence fee. There have been a lot of calls to scrap the licence fee, and this is also because they believe that the BBC has a left-wing slant. They say it's too woke or that it's not giving the conservative viewpoint. So they try to latch onto any controversy the BBC makes. So any kind of misreporting during the war, such as the Al Ahli hospital bombing in October 2023, which was when a PIJ rocket landed in a hospital. There were multiple people who were killed. They said that this was Israel who did that. This was actually Hamas who did that. So they try and latch onto anything with the idea to try and slam the BBC.
Well, we'll have to see if anything does come and the BBC actually follows up on this push for a probe. Our correspondent Joe Brown joining us in studio. Thank you so much. That's how we're going to wrap up this latest edition of The Rundown here on I-24 News. You can always head to i24news.tv for more updates on any of these developing stories in the region. It's always I'm Nicole Zedek, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
יש לך שתי ברירות, או לבחור בחיים או להיכנס לדיכאון. אתם נמצאים במקום לא פשוט.
שזה נקרא בעצם צד של אבן. תחושה של הלכו לי החיים, ואני לא יודע לאן אני הולך.
Our heroes have sacrificed their life for us, and the people of Israel owe them everything. This Purim, by donating 15,000 Mishlochei Manot baskets, we will support 5 important rehabilitation projects for our 15,000 wounded. Thanks to Meir Panim, we won't have any cost for the baskets, so 100% of your donations will go directly to these projects. Donate now, and together we will give our heroes the love they deserve. Am Yisrael Chai.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on i24 News.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing i24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News app today.
Hello and welcome to Jewish World Weekly on i24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Each week we're focusing on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interest here in Israel and in the diaspora, the global Jewish community. And we start with our top 5 items in the Jewish world, presented by Nicole Zedek. Nicole.
Thanks, Emily. Here are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. A Jewish man in Florida was arrested for shooting 2 Israeli tourists when he thought they were Palestinian. Mordechai Brafman told police he killed 2 Palestinians, despite only causing minor injuries to the Israeli father and son in Miami. Brofman was previously interviewed by local news condemning anti-Semitic vandalism on a Miami bagel shop and saying he wanted more unity and less fighting. More than 50 New York rabbis have written to the city's mayor, Eric Adams, and the state governor, Kathy Hochul, urging them to halt mass deportations. The letter, signed by prominent rabbis of various denominations, references early Jewish migration to New York and subsequent persecution, and urges the New York leaders to restrict immigration raids in schools and places of worships, slamming the Trump administration's recent moves on the issue. The Hungarian Education Ministry has announced a new university program focusing on Jewish studies. The program will take place at Milton Friedman University, named after the American economist whose parents fled Hungary, and will be done in person in Hungarian, as well as offering online courses in English. Plans are also underway for Hungary to open its first Jewish school since the Holocaust. Jacqueline Van Marsen, a classmate and close friend of Anne Frank, has died at the age of 96. Van Marsen, who had a Jewish father, survived the Holocaust due to her Catholic upbringing and began lecturing on the Holocaust in the 1980s. Anne Frank wrote to Van Marsen in one of her final diary entries that, quote, "Until we see each other again, we will always remain best friends." And visitors to Israel's Ben Gurion Airport will be greeted by a new display showing Israel's archaeological history dating back 3,000 years. The exhibit from Israel's Antiquities Authority features an original Western Wall stone weighing 5 tons and agricultural tools from a Hasmonean-era farm that are being displayed for the first time. The exhibit will run until January 2026. Those are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Emily.
A New York City councilwoman is quitting the city council's Women's Caucus after they refused to condemn Hamas terrorists in the October 7th attack. Ina Vernikov explained that she made the bold decision after seeing the disturbing videos of the female hostages being released with all the pomp and circumstance on the part of Hamas. We are now joined by Ina Vernikov, who is in New York City. Thank you very much for joining us and, of course, for your continued bravery and advocacy despite the potential fallout. Explain why you made this decision and why it was so disturbing for you to see the silence of other women.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. Look, we are a body of 51 council members. 30 plus of those are women. And I sat on this Women's Caucus, and the Women's Caucus is supposed to promote rights of women, stand up for women who are abused, stand up for women who are raped, just really focus on advocating for women. And when it came to this issue, when we watched this horrendous video of these female young 20-year-old Jewish hostages who were in the tunnels, who were in the dark, God knows what was done to them. When we watched them come out of captivity, surrounded by these Hamas terrorists in masks and weapons drawn, and we watched their faces so terrified, all I asked was for the Women's Caucus to make a simple statement condemning the terrorists and supporting these women and calling for the remaining hostages to be released. And the Women's Caucus, in its hypocrisy, could not do that without context. That was reason enough for me to leave the caucus and make a statement that I will not stand for this hypocrisy, for this woke, sick mindset, and I'm going to leave and make a statement.
Well, and the fact that you're choosing, a career in public service, obviously by making that decision, it's very important for you to make a difference and to advocate for women. But also some of your Jewish colleagues didn't condemn it. Like they said, they stayed quiet because they didn't want to have their personal opinions felt, that they came to Israel, more empowering to visit the families. So I imagine that was disappointing, especially.
Well, this is just the problem that we have here in the city with our leadership. We have weak and spineless leadership where even if we have, Jewish elected officials, not Jewish elected officials, and the problem is mostly with the Democrats and the Democratic Party, but they may stand with us and they may believe in the right things and have the right opinions, but they are so afraid and petrified of the radical left to stand up and say anything. They're so afraid that, you know, when they go to Israel, they're afraid to post a picture saying, here I am in Israel visiting the kibbutz. They're afraid to stand up and take any action that will, you know, result in a blowback politically. And they do what's politically convenient for them, and I will not stand for that.
Well, you know, it just goes to show, you know, you chose this profession not just for the votes, standing by, you know, your own values and your own beliefs. I mean, you even were quite bold in 2023. You went to a pro-Palestinian protest. You were, you know, arrested, later cleared. But, you know, ironic given, you know, all the protesters on all the campuses that we've seen pretty much given free passes.
I mean, we saw that a couple of days ago here in Brooklyn. We had a violent protest. I wouldn't even call it a protest. Palestinians, I don't even want to call them Palestinians. They're pro-jihad, they're pro-Hamas. They came to the most Jewish neighborhood in the country to cause violence, to incite, to threaten. There was a lot of violence that took place. And you know what we got from the leadership of our city? We got a statement on Twitter, on X, saying we condemn anti-Semitism and we won't tolerate this. But we did tolerate it because that protest could have been canceled. They did not have a permit. And this is what happens here in the city and in this country with the Democratic Party and with Democratic leadership in charge. Thankfully, now we have President Trump, who came in bold and defiant, and thanks to him, we saw the release of more hostages. But you know, individually in cities like New York, we have woke and scared leadership that's full of cowardice.
Wow, and I mean, listen. Also, we're seeing you know, continued violence. I mean, do you experience, you know, Jews living in fear and nervousness around New York? You said you're in Brooklyn and New York, people hiding their Magen Davids. I mean, are you concerned about a rising wave of anti-Semitism, especially given that they're not being held to task within, you know, your own city council?
It has been on the rise. Even before October 7th, we saw a tremendous rise in anti-Semitism in America and in New York like we've never seen before. And, you know, I'm very hopeful, though, because we have the right leadership in charge now, who is very supportive of Israel, of the Jewish people, and who will really not tolerate the anti-Semitism and the hostile environment on college campuses, who is actually taking bold actions, not just giving us empty platitudes.
All right. Thank you very much, Inna Vernikov. And, you know, keep up the good work and not backing down and holding true and firm to your values. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Last week, the United States recognized the President's Day holiday, which falls annually around the birthdays of both President Washington and President Lincoln. And with so much changing during the new Trump administration, including a bid to add President Trump to Mount Rushmore, raising a lot of questions. And it just furthers a conversation of a lot of history that people do not know about. Joining us live via Zoom from Cold, Massachusetts is Brandeis American and Jewish History Professor Jonathan Sarna, the author of the book Lincoln and the Jews, which recently just came out in paperback. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I myself have read many of your books, including this one. And Abraham Lincoln's relationship with the Jews runs deep. A lot of people don't know this part about Jewish history. He grew up with a deep knowledge of the Old Testament, the Torah, and a connection to his biblical namesake, which is also my grandpa's name. So explain why, even then, Isaac Mayer, the Rabbi Isaac Mayer Weiss, said that he was the greatest man to spring from mortal loins. Explain, more about his deep connection.
Abraham Lincoln was really our first president who had close Jewish friends. He had met them in Illinois. By the time he comes of age, Jews have spread across the country. And one of the people he works closely with is Abraham Jonas. And Abraham Jonas even played a significant role in the Republican Party's formation and in obtaining the nomination for Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln, as we show in the book, had many other Jewish acquaintances. In the Civil War, he actually writes in a letter, "We have not yet appointed a Hebrew," and he proceeds to do so. Most importantly, Abraham Lincoln changes, or is responsible for changing, a chaplaincy law that originally restricted the chaplaincy to ministers of some Christian denomination, and he engineered a way to make that some religious denomination, and then appointed the first Jewish chaplain. And finally, when Ulysses S. Grant in 1862 expels Jews from Grant's war zone, Lincoln, as soon as he hears of that, overturns the order. So it's not surprising that Jews remember Abraham Lincoln very warmly.
Right. Also, you talked about his, second inaugural address being considered to be, among the greatest, if not the greatest, speeches of all time. He drew heavily on the Bible, mentioned God 14 times in a short speech, and it really kind of showed his grappling with how did the Civil War happen and the devastation. How does it relate to God? Explain, more about that.
Lincoln may well have been our most biblically knowledgeable president. He studied the Bible at home. That was probably the only book in his house. He knew much of it by heart, and he was trying to understand, how did God permit such a deadly war as the Civil War? And he concludes boldly that it must be a response to the great sin of slavery. It was a remarkable inaugural address. We know that he was proud of it. He felt it was important to say. Of course, not long after that, he was assassinated on what for Jews was Friday night of Shabbat Chol HaMoed Pesach, what Christians knew as Good Friday.
Wow, it's really crazy to think about that. And also, he had spoken to his wife about wanting to go to the Holy Land. And, the steamship was the greatest, change of the Industrial Revolution. Later, he didn't get there, but Mark Twain later did and whatnot. Very also providential timing to mention that.
Yeah, and I think going to the Holy Land for a lot of Americans in second half of the 19th century involved going to the source of spirituality. Lincoln thought maybe some of his questions would be answered there. Mark Twain, as you say, is on the first organized tour of the Holy Land by steam, time certain. I know when I'm going, I know when I'm returning. And he then writes a famous book. Ulysses S. Grant is going to travel to the Holy Land. That's really the beginning of a new day where people no longer imagine, where Jews will go back to the promised land on eagle's wings or on thunderstorm clouds. Now they know perfectly well how to get back to the land of Israel. They'll travel by steam.
Really incredible. Now let's talk about George Washington, another little-known fact. Unfortunately, he had famous 1790 correspondence with Moses Seixas, who was the founder, one of the founders of the first synagogue on American soil, Touro Synagogue, promising religious freedom. Children of the stock of Abraham, a quote, being safe under their own fig and vine tree. I mean, really, this is incredible. The letter still exists. Also shows the promise of the United States at that time to be a land for all.
Yeah, and the fact that Jews give and when he comes to Newport, he visits there. Jews present a letter which talks about their desire to hear from the president that they will be equal citizens. And George Washington then responds with that famous letter. One of the amazing things about that letter is that Washington adds something the Jews didn't even ask when he says it's not just toleration that Jews can expect in America, because toleration implies that it's by the indulgence of one group that another receives their inherent natural right. Unlike in Europe, where emancipation is often a quid pro quo, Jews have to change or they'll lose their emancipation, Washington dubs it an inherent natural right. Those, of course, cannot be taken away, and no surprise the Jews have considered that letter crucially important. And of course, Washington applies to Jews his favorite biblical verse, comes over and over in his letters about vine and fig tree. And just as he wants to sit under his own vine and fig tree in Mount Vernon, he hopes the Jews will be able to live under their own vine and fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. A biblical reference. And
wow. And the rest is history. I wish we had more time, Professor Sarna, but like the rest is history. Look they must be rolling in their graves at what has become of the Jewish experience when they were able to right so many wrongs. That goes back to Peter Stuyvesant in the 1600s that didn't want to let Jews in. So definitely interesting times we're in, and much appreciated, Professor Jonathan Sarna.
Thank you.
Following the removal of Bashar al-Assad from power, Syrian Jews have been able to return to their home after a 30-year absence. Coming as a new Syrian government makes efforts to allow members of all religions to perform their religious duties freely. Here's more in this next report by our Jody Natelovitz.
Rabbi Yosef Hamra is back in his home city of Damascus 33 years after he and more than 5,000 other Jews were forced to leave by the Ba'ath Party regime in 1992. Along with a delegation of other prominent figures from the Jewish Syrian community in the United States, he visited some of the historical sites in Damascus, the Maimonides Jewish School, the tomb of Rabbi Chaim Vital, and the Jobar Synagogue, which was destroyed by the Assad regime.
It brings back the memories of when I lived here. We were here day and night, and we would spend hours in prayer. I was the rabbi here, like I said. The place was always full, and people used to come and pray here.
The remaining Jews in Syria were prevented from visiting the Jobar Synagogue until the day the regime fell. In January, the head of the Syrian Jewish community was the first to revisit the synagogue. And 3 years ago, 12 American Jews of Syrian descent returned on a friendly visit to Damascus and met the last Jews remaining in Syria. Bashar al-Assad backed the visit officially in an attempt to improve his international image by encouraging American Jews to visit Syria and pledging to protect them. Moaz Mustafa, executive director of the Syrian Emergency Organization, which helped coordinate the visit, said that the new government in Damascus supports the return of all Syrians to their homeland, including Jews.
So there is now a delegation present at this time to reclaim their properties. Hopefully, this is the first delegation of many. It will be a normal thing for the Syrian Jews to come back to their country and live here.
He's the man that everyone loves to hate on television, that is. Comedian Larry David, star of Curb Your Enthusiasm, got a taste of his own medicine by a charming 21-year-old Chabadnik named Yossi Faro. Take a look.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Larry. Yeah. First of all, have you ever rapped tefillin before? No, I haven't. You've never rapped tefillin before? No, I haven't. Okay, let's do it. I'm trying to think of the amount of money it would take for me to do that.
We are now going to Miami, where we are joined by Yossi Faro of Crown Heights, Brooklyn, who's been on a mission to rep to fill in on Jewish celebrities and even strangers. Hello, superstar.
We doing?
First of all, so brave. I mean, to shout out in a big crowd, but making everyone's favorite grump laugh, that's a big accomplishment in and of itself, even if he didn't do the tefillin.
100%. Not just do we make him laugh. As we all know, Larry David's the fastest to respond to anything, and it took him a minute to respond to this one.
Yeah. Did he do it in the end?
Not yet, but I didn't give up. We're going to get him eventually. He's never done it in his life, and I will make sure he does it, God willing.
Yeah. So other celebrities that you have been successful with?
Yes, thank God many.
Yeah, like?
James Franco, Little Dicky, Scooter Braun, Michael Rappaport. So many, thank God.
Wow, it's amazing. And listen, I think a lot of American Jews, secular, don't really engage in this tradition. But we know about the Levitcher Rebbe. He took Chabad, he took it to a movement to allow Jews, no matter what level they're on, to be able to connect. So explain why the act of doing tefillin, you don't have to become Orthodox, but why is it so important?
So we put tefillin right over here next to our heart. We put it right over here next to our head. And it shows our mind should control our heart. But also another thing, when did the Rebbe start this tefillin campaign? He started right by the 6-Day War, when it says, when you put on tefillin, the nations of the world will fear you, right? So the Rebbe said that the Rebbe started the campaign for soldiers to put on tefillin, and later moved it that everyone should put on tefillin. And through putting on tefillin, the nations of the world will fear us. And it's a quick, easy way to connect to God. It'll take 1 minute. And yeah, thank God I've had the opportunity of doing it with so many amazing individuals.
Right. It's no doubt a frequency. When you go into the depths of it, you could really learn so much about this practice, which, the outside world looks a little strange, but it's obviously so very important. Now, here you are, a social media influencer, many Instagram followers. So a great way to carry this tradition and to make it cool. So are you having any luck with the younger generation, especially now that people are more in fear?
No, 100%. So the younger generation is actually my main clientele and the first people I started with. So I lived in LA for 2 years. I used to go visit Beverly Hills High School, which is the largest public school with the largest Jewish population, with probably close to 1,000 students. I used to go rap film with probably 50 kids every single week. Next week, I'll be in New York City for C-Teen, which is the Chabad Teen Network, where 3,500 teens from over 400 cities and 55 countries come to Brooklyn for a Shabbat. And we have a concert in Times Square and just a weekend of Jewish pride and Jewish religion and Jewish heritage.
Yeah. Also pretty cool. I mean, when celebrities are on edge about questions, I mean, this is something that, somebody's going to smile no matter what. So I know you have your eyes on the big
100%.
guns, like Seinfeld, Schwimmer, even Zuckerberg. So how are you going to, go about tracking them down? You're going to pull a Borat or try to go through the proper channels?
So, for example, Seinfeld, we know his wife's been so vocal. God willing, someone can help connect me to her, and Bezrat Hashem will get him. Schwimmer is a good friend of my good friend. Schwimmer is a co-actor with Michael Rappaport. Michael Rappaport said, God willing, we'll be able to get David. And then Mark Zuckerberg, thank God we have a few mutual friends, and Bezrat Hashem will be able to get him very soon. I was actually at his party a few weeks ago in Washington, so we were in the same room together, and Bezrat Hashem will get him very soon.
It really is so cool. How are other people reacting to you? I know I lived in New York. I know the Mitzvah Tank, the Chabad guys are there with business people that are coming in. And, it's a very fun, cool atmosphere. So are you also making it enjoyable?
100%. It's an amazing, fun thing. As you saw, pictures, we did it in the middle of the inauguration, right? We had a suite, and we did film with everyone in the suite. Or we used to go with speakers to the high school every week and play music and just make it fun for the kids. Make Judaism fun for these kids. Make it enjoyable. Show that this celebrity, that celebrity, this businessman, that businessman could do it. You could do it. You know what I'm saying? You make it trendy. You make it viral. You make it inspiring. For example, I did it with Jake Paul last week, and that got 15 million views in 24 hours. And
wow.
I can't tell you the amount of people inspired to go put on their tefillin right after seeing Jake Paul or Aiden Ross, or I'm friendly with the most influential Gen Z Jew in the world. He's 2 years older than me. He has 30 million followers. He's probably the most influential Jew in my age range. And we just did tefillin with him on a Friday, and we do tefillin on his live stream, viewed by 50,000 people live. Like we do tefillin all together all the time. And like he's an example. People see Ada Ross did tefillin. Okay, I have to do